Christmas lights twinkled through the frosty windows, but inside my kitchen, silence cut like a knife. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, had just finished announcing in her smug, entitled tone, "Christmas dinner will be at your place. Only 25 guests. You'll take care of it, of course." She smirked, certain I would bow my head and obey like always. But this time, I didn't. "Perfect," I said, calmly, locking eyes with her. "I won't be here. You can handle the cooking and cleaning." Her face drained of all color. The mug in her hand clinked against the counter, trembling. She had built her entire facade around me being her silent servant. And at that moment, she realized her little empire of lies was about to collapse, right in front of the very family she was trying to impress. The December wind rattled my kitchen windows as I stirred the homemade chicken soup, the same recipe my mother had taught me decades ago. Steam rose from the pot, fogging my glasses slightly, but I didn't mind. This was my sanctuary, my domain. At least it used to be, until Vanessa came into our lives 5 years ago. "Mom, we're here," my son Daniel's voice called out from the entryway. I wiped my hands on my apron and took a deep breath, preparing my face for the smile I always forced when they visited. "In the kitchen," I called back, adjusting the flame under the pot. Daniel appeared first, his kind face, so much like his father's, breaking into a genuine smile. Behind him trailed Vanessa, her designer boots clicking against my hardwood floors, her eyes already scanning my home for imperfections she could later comment on. "It smells amazing in here," Daniel said, giving me a quick hug before sitting at the kitchen island. Vanessa didn't bother with a greeting. Instead, she placed her expensive handbag on my clean counter and pulled out her phone. "Your baseboards need dusting," she murmured without looking up. I ignored the comment, as I had dozens before it. "How was the drive?" I asked Daniel, serving him a small bowl of soup as an appetizer before our lunch. "Not bad. Traffic was light for a Saturday," he replied, blowing on a spoonful. Vanessa finally looked up from her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping impatiently against the marble countertop I'd saved for years to install. "Elaine, we need to discuss Christmas." The way she said my name, not Mom, or mother-in-law, always stung slightly, but I'd grown accustomed to it. "Oh, I thought we were doing Christmas Eve at your parents' house this year." A flash of something, annoyance, panic, crossed her face. "There's been a change of plans. My mother's renovations aren't finished. The contractors are way behind schedule." She sighed dramatically. "So unfortunate." Daniel looked up, surprise evident on his face. This was clearly news to him, too. "Christmas dinner will be at your place," Vanessa continued, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Only 25 guests. You'll take care of it, of course." The spoon in my hand froze midway to the pot. 25 guests? I echoed, my mind racing through the logistics. The food, the cleaning, the preparation, all while working my part-time job at the library. "Yes," Vanessa replied dismissively, scrolling through her phone again. "My parents, my 3 siblings and their families, Aunt Lucia, Uncle Alejandro and his kids, Cousin Marco and his new wife, and a few close friends." She looked up with that smirk I'd grown to dread. "It's not that many, Elaine. And your house is quaint, but it should work." Something inside me shifted in that moment. Perhaps it was the culmination of 5 years of subtle insults. Perhaps it was the memory that flashed through my mind of last Christmas, when I'd spent 3 days cooking a feast that Vanessa had promptly photographed for her Instagram, captioning it, "My homemade holiday dinner for the family." Perhaps it was simply that I was tired, bone-deep tired of being invisible in my own life. "Perfect," I said calmly, locking eyes with her. "I won't be here. You can handle the cooking and cleaning." The kitchen fell silent. Daniel's spoon clattered against the bowl. Vanessa's face drained of all color, her perfectly applied foundation suddenly appearing mask-like against her shocked expression. "What do you mean you won't be here?" Daniel asked, confusion evident in his voice. "Mom, it's Christmas." "I know what day it is, Daniel," I replied, turning off the stove and removing my apron with deliberate motions. "And after 52 years on this earth, I've decided I'd like to spend it differently this year." Vanessa's shock was quickly morphing into anger. "You can't just decide not to be here. This is your home. Where would you even go?" The fact that she was more concerned about the venue than my absence spoke volumes. I moved to the refrigerator and pulled out the salad I'd prepared earlier. "I've booked a cabin up at Lake Tahoe," I said, surprised at how steady my voice remained. The reservation had actually been a hopeful whim last month, a small act of rebellion I hadn't been sure I'd follow through on. I'll be leaving on the 23rd. Mom? Daniel's voice took on that tone, the one that said he was about to try to reason with me, to pull me back into line. This is really sudden. We always spend Christmas together. Yes, we do, I agreed, setting the salad bowl on the table. And for the past 5 years, I've spent every Christmas cooking, cleaning, and serving, only to be criticized for using the wrong napkins or making too much noise with the dishes. This year, I'm giving myself the gift of peace. Vanessa's phone was now clutched tightly in her hand, her knuckles white. But who will cook? Where will everyone sit? What about decorations? Her voice rose with each question, the panic setting in. I met her gaze directly. That sounds like a problem for the hostess to figure out. I am the hostess, she snapped. Exactly, I replied, placing the last of the lunch items on the table. Shall we eat? Daniel looked between us, conflict written across his face. This was the first time I'd ever openly challenged Vanessa, and he seemed unsure whose side he should take. Mom, he started, his voice gentle but with an undercurrent of reproach. I'm sure Vanessa didn't mean to overwhelm you. Maybe we can compromise? Hire a caterer, perhaps? Before I could respond, Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted to one of poorly concealed panic. It's my mother, she said, rising quickly. I need to take this. She stepped into the living room, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Daniel leaned across the table. Mom, what's really going on? This isn't like you. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. The boy who had once looked to me for everything now seemed like a stranger sometimes, caught in Vanessa's web. I've just realized something, Daniel, I said softly. Respect is earned, not demanded. And for too long, I've allowed myself to be disrespected in my own home. His eyes widened slightly, but before he could respond, Vanessa returned, her face a mask of composure that didn't quite hide the agitation underneath. My mother wants to speak with you, she said stiffly, extending the phone toward me. As I took it, I realized this was the first move in a game I hadn't planned on playing, but one I was suddenly determined to win. The moment I took Vanessa's phone, I knew I was crossing a threshold. For 5 years, I had carefully maintained peace at the expense of my dignity. Now, with my daughter-in-law's mother waiting on the line, I realized how tired I was of tiptoeing around the truth. Hello, Catherine, I said pleasantly, as if we were discussing the weather rather than her daughter's sudden domestic crisis. Elaine! Catherine's voice was sharp, carrying that same entitled tone her daughter had perfected. There seems to be some misunderstanding about Christmas. Vanessa tells me you're refusing to host. I moved to the window, watching the oak tree in my backyard sway in the December wind. How many holidays had I spent looking at that tree while washing dishes after everyone else had settled into comfortable conversation in the living room? There's no misunderstanding, I replied calmly. Vanessa has decided to host Christmas at my house. I've decided to spend Christmas elsewhere. Both statements are true. There was a pause, then a laugh that held no humor. Come now, Elaine. Be reasonable. Where would the family gather if not at your place? Vanessa's told us all how much you love playing hostess. The irony of her statement struck me like a physical blow. Playing hostess? I had never played at anything. I had worked, sweated, and exhausted myself while Vanessa played the gracious lady of the manor in my home. I'm sure Vanessa can manage, I said. After all, according to her social media, she's quite the accomplished cook and entertainer. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear Catherine's mind working, recalculating her approach. Elaine. Her voice dropped to what she likely thought was a conspiratorial tone. I understand that at your age, these big gatherings can be overwhelming. But family tradition is important, don't you think? Daniel would be so disappointed. My age. As if 52 made me some doddering old woman, incapable of making my own decisions. I looked across the room at Daniel, who was watching me with worried eyes, and Vanessa, whose expression had morphed into one of barely contained fury. Actually, Catherine, what I find overwhelming isn't my age. It's the consistent disrespect I've endured for the sake of keeping peace. I took a breath, memories flooding back of all the times I'd swallowed my pride. Did you know that last Easter Vanessa told your friends that I was her part-time housekeeper? That I was lucky she kept me around? Daniel's head snapped toward Vanessa, whose face had gone from angry to ashen. Clearly, this was news to him. I'm sure there was a misunderstanding, Catherine stammered. There have been a lot of those, I continued, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. Like the misunderstanding about who actually cooked the 7-course meal that won Vanessa so many compliments last Christmas, or the misunderstanding about who spent 3 days decorating the house that Vanessa showcased in her Home and Style feature as her own design work. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Elaine," Catherine finally said, her voice noticeably cooler, "I think you're being rather dramatic about this whole situation." I closed my eyes briefly. Dramatic. The label that had been placed on me whenever I'd tried to speak up in the past. "Perhaps," I conceded. "But I've booked a lovely cabin for Christmas, and I intend to use it. Vanessa is welcome to host here, but she'll need to handle the preparations herself." I ended the call before Catherine could respond, handing the phone back to a stunned Vanessa. "Mom," Daniel started, his voice a mixture of confusion and growing concern. "What was that about? What did you mean about Easter?" I returned to my seat at the table, motioning for them both to sit. "The soup's getting cold," I said simply. Vanessa remained standing, her composure clearly cracked. "You had no right to say those things to my mother. Yet you had the right to lie to her and everyone else?" I asked, meeting her gaze directly. "To take credit for my work? To treat me like hired help?" Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Vanessa, tell me that's not true." But instead of answering him, she directed her fury at me. "You're trying to ruin everything. My family respects me. They look up to me." "Based on what?" I asked quietly. "On achievements that aren't yours? On a life you fabricated?" Daniel stood now, too, his lunch forgotten. "Will someone please tell me what's going on?" I sighed, feeling suddenly exhausted by the weight of years of silence. "Your wife has been using me as her personal chef, decorator, and housekeeper while taking credit for everything I do. She's been lying to her family about her role here, about her abilities, and about me." I turned to look directly at Vanessa. "And I've let her? Because I was afraid of losing you, Daniel. Afraid that if I spoke up, you'd choose her side, as you've done every other time there's been conflict between us." The color drained from my son's face. He turned to Vanessa, a question in his eyes that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Vanessa's lips thinned into a hard line. "She's exaggerating. You know how sensitive she is." But something had shifted in Daniel's expression. A flicker of doubt. Perhaps the first real doubt he'd allowed himself to feel about the woman he'd married. "Am I exaggerating about the Instagram posts?" I asked gently. "About the magazine feature? About Easter?" Vanessa's silence was answer enough. I rose from the table, suddenly needing space. "I think it's best if you both leave now. I have preparations to make for my trip." "Mom, wait," Daniel said, taking a step toward me. "We need to talk about this." "Yes, we do," I agreed. "But not today. I've said what needed to be said, and now I need some time." Vanessa grabbed her purse from the counter, her movements jerky with anger. "Fine, let's go, Daniel. Obviously, your mother has decided to create drama just in time for the holidays." But Daniel didn't move. For the first time in 5 years, he seemed to be truly seeing the dynamic between his wife and his mother. "Go ahead to the car," he told Vanessa, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll be there in a minute." The look Vanessa gave him was venomous, but she stalked out without further argument, the front door slamming behind her. In the sudden silence of my kitchen, Daniel and I stood facing each other, mother and son, separated by years of unspoken truths. "Is it really that bad?" he asked, his voice small, almost childlike in its uncertainty. I thought about lying, about softening the blow to spare his feelings, but we'd had enough lies. "Yes," I said simply. "It's been that bad for a long time." He nodded slowly, pain etched across his features. "I should have seen it. I should have known." "You saw what you wanted to see," I replied, without accusation. "We all do that sometimes." He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me in a hug that felt like the first real embrace we'd shared in years. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I held him tightly, feeling a mixture of grief for what we'd lost and hope for what might still be saved. "I know, sweetheart. I know." As I watched him walk to the car where Vanessa waited, I knew this was only the beginning. The comfortable lies we'd all been living with had been exposed to the light, and there would be consequences. But for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. The strength of standing in my own truth. The 2 days after my confrontation with Vanessa and Daniel passed in a strange sort of limbo. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls, from Daniel, pleading for us to talk things through, from Vanessa, alternating between angry demands and syrupy attempts at reconciliation, and even from Catherine, whose messages grew increasingly frantic as her daughter's Christmas hosting crisis deepened. I responded to Daniel briefly, promising we would talk after Christmas. The others, I simply let ring, through to voicemail. Instead of engaging with their drama, I focused on my own quiet rebellion. On Monday morning, I walked through my house with new eyes, making a mental inventory. The fine china that had been passed down from my grandmother. The same china that Vanessa had showcased to her friends as a set she'd discovered at an estate sale. I carefully packed away in boxes and stored in the attic. The crystal glasses, the silver serving pieces, the embroidered holiday linens, all of them joined the china in their temporary exile. Next came the pantry. I emptied it methodically, donating the non-perishables to the local food bank and packing the specialty ingredients I'd been gathering for Christmas dinner into boxes for my trip. The refrigerator followed, cleared of everything except a carton of milk and some basic condiments. By Tuesday afternoon, my kitchen looked as barren as my emotional landscape had felt for the past 5 years. "Are you sure about this, Elaine?" my best friend Margaret asked as she helped me carry the last box to my car. We'd been friends since college, and she was one of the few people who had seen through Vanessa from the beginning. About standing up? For myself? Yes, I replied, closing the trunk. About how I'm doing it? I don't know, but it feels necessary. Margaret's eyes were concerned. I just worry that you're burning bridges with Daniel. I leaned against the car, feeling the December chill through my sweater. The bridge with Daniel has been crumbling for years, I said softly. At least now we're both acknowledging it's in need of repair. And Vanessa? I laughed, a short, humorless sound. That bridge was never real to begin with. It was just a facade, like everything else about her. Margaret nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd listened to my stories for years, urging me to speak up long before I found the courage to do so. Well, I think the cabin sounds wonderful, she said, changing the subject. A white? Christmas in the mountains? Very Hallmark movie. I smiled, grateful for her support. Except there's no handsome widower with a precocious child waiting for me there. You never know, Margaret winked. Maybe you'll meet a rugged mountain man who teaches you to ice fish and reawaken your sense of adventure. We laughed together, and for a moment I felt lighter than I had in months. That night, as I sat by my fireplace with a glass of wine, my phone rang again. Daniel. I hesitated, then answered. Mom. His voice sounded strained, exhausted. Hi, sweetheart, I said, working to keep my tone neutral. I need to talk to you about something. He paused, and I could hear him take a deep breath. I've been going through some of Vanessa's papers. My heart sank. Oh? She's been hiding. Things from me. Financial things. Another pause. We're in debt, Mom. A lot of debt. The revelation didn't surprise me as much as it should have. There had been signs. Vanessa's constant stream of new designer clothes and accessories despite her sporadic employment, the luxury vacations they took that seemed beyond their means, the way she dodged questions about their finances. How bad is it? I asked gently. Credit cards, personal loans, all in my name. His voice cracked. Over $40,000. I closed my eyes, feeling his pain as if it were my own. I'm so sorry, Daniel. Did you know? The question wasn't accusatory, just seeking understanding. I suspected something, I admitted. The spending seemed excessive, but I didn't know the details. He was quiet for so long that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. She told her family you promised them your house when you're gone. The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. She what? Her mother mentioned it today when she called to discuss Christmas again. She talked about how generous you were for promising to leave your home to Vanessa and me, how it made sense since we'd taken such good care of you. The audacity of the lie left me speechless. My home, the house I'd worked 2 jobs to afford after Daniel's father died, the sanctuary I'd created for myself, promised away without my knowledge or consent. Mom, are you still there? I swallowed hard. Yes, I'm here. Daniel, I never made any such promise. Ever. I know. He said quietly. I know. That now. The weight of his realization hung between us. Not just about this lie, but about all of them. The entire foundation of deception his marriage had been built upon. What are you going to do? I asked. His sigh carried the weight of a man facing painful truths. I don't know yet, but I needed you to know that I see it now. All of it. After we hung up, I sat staring into the fire, processing our conversation. Part of me wanted to cancel my trip, to stay and help Daniel through this crisis. But another part, the part that had finally found its voice, knew that stepping back was the kindest thing I could do, both for him and for myself. He needed to find his own way through this maze of lies without me trying to guide him. The next morning, I woke to a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Alejandro, Vanessa's uncle. Catherine gave me your number. Need to speak with you urgently about Christmas plans and some concerning information that's come to light. Can you call?" I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was unexpected. Alejandro was Catherine's brother, a serious, dignified man who had always treated me with distant politeness on the few occasions we'd met. What concerning information could he be referring to? Before I could decide whether to respond, my doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock, 9:17 a.m., and frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Vanessa. Her usual perfect appearance was noticeably disheveled, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, minimal, makeup, clothing casual to the point of being sloppy for her usual standards. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, attempting to step past me into the house. I stood my ground, blocking the doorway. "I don't think that's a good idea right now." Her eyes widened in disbelief. Never before had I directly refused her entry. "Are you serious? It's freezing out here." "Then we can talk on the phone later," I replied, my hand still firmly on the door. "I have appointments today." Anger flashed across her face. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child." I almost laughed at the irony. "No, Vanessa. For the first time in years, I'm acting like an adult who respects herself. There's a difference." She shifted strategies, her expression morphing into one of pleading vulnerability. Look, I'd seen her practice in the mirror once when she thought no one was watching. "Please, Elaine. My mother is freaking out about Christmas. Everyone's expecting this big family gathering, and I need your help. 5 days ago," those words might have swayed me. 5 days ago, I was still the woman who bent over backward to keep peace, who sacrificed her own needs for others' comfort. But not anymore. "You're resourceful," I said calmly. "I'm sure you'll figure something out." Her mask of vulnerability slipped, replaced by naked frustration. "What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. Is that what you need to hear?" I studied her face. The face that had smiled sweetly to my friends while undermining me behind my back. The face that had looked directly at me while spinning lies about my life and intentions. "What I need," I said slowly, "is time and space. What I want is respect. Real respect, not performative politeness when it suits you. And what I expect is honesty, which you've never given me." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Daniel knows about the debt, Vanessa, and about the lie you told your family regarding my house." All color drained from her face. "He had no right to go through my things," she whispered. "And you had no right to destroy his credit or promise away my property," I countered. "Actions have consequences. It's time you faced yours." She drew herself up, anger replacing shock. "You think you've won something here, don't you? You think turning Daniel against me makes you powerful?" I shook my head slowly. "This isn't about winning or power. It's about truth. And the truth is, I've enabled your behavior for too long because I was afraid of losing my son. That ends now." I began to close the door, but her hand shot out, gripping the edge. "Wait, what am I supposed to tell everyone about Christmas?" The desperation in her voice confirmed what I'd suspected all along. This was never about family togetherness. It was about appearances, about the image she'd cultivated so carefully. "Tell them whatever you want," I said. "Just don't expect me to maintain your illusions anymore." With that, I gently but firmly closed the door, turning the lock with a decisive click. Through the window, I watched her stand there for a moment, fists clenched at her sides, before storming back to her car. As she drove away, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, just a quiet certainty that I was finally reclaiming the respect I deserved. My phone buzzed with another text from Alejandro. "Please call when you can, it's important." This time I typed a response. "I can talk at noon, we'll call then." Whatever was coming next, I would face it with the same clarity and strength I'd just discovered within myself. At precisely noon, I dialed Alejandro's number, settling into the window seat that overlooked my snow-dusted garden. My suitcases stood packed by the front door, ready for my departure the next morning. "Elaine," Alejandro's deep voice answered on the second ring. "Thank you for calling." "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone professional. "How can I help you?" There was a moment of hesitation before he spoke again. "I'm in a difficult position. My sister Catherine is insisting that we proceed with Christmas at your home as Vanessa has promised. But I've received some concerning information that makes me question whether this is appropriate. I waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. Last night, my son Marco received an email. He continued. It contained documents showing significant debt in Daniel's name, along with screenshots of social media posts where Vanessa claimed credit for work she didn't do. Your work specifically. My breath caught. I didn't send any email. I know, Alejandro replied, his tone grave. The email came from Daniel. I closed my eyes, processing this revelation. Daniel had taken matters into his own hands, exposing Vanessa's deceptions to her family directly. There's more, Alejandro continued. The email also included a recording, a phone conversation between Vanessa and Catherine, discussing how you had allegedly promised to leave your home to them and how they planned to renovate once it was theirs. My fingers tightened around the phone. I see. Elaine, his voice softened slightly. I want to apologize. Our family has clearly been operating under false pretenses. Had I known how you were being treated, I would have intervened long ago. The apology was unexpected and strangely moving. In the 5 years of knowing Vanessa's family, this was the first genuine moment of respect I'd experienced. Thank you, I said simply. But that doesn't explain why you're calling. No, it doesn't. He cleared his throat. 2 reasons, actually. First, to let you know that many of us will not be attending Christmas at your home, regardless of what Catherine and Vanessa insist. It would be inappropriate, given the circumstances. Relief washed over me. At least some members of the family had a moral compass. And second, he continued, to warn you, Catherine and Vanessa are, well, they're planning something. I'm not entirely sure what, but they're not accepting this situation gracefully. I didn't expect they would, I replied, thinking of Vanessa's face at my doorstep earlier. Just be careful, Alejandro advised, and know that not all of us condone their behavior. After ending the call, I sat for a long time, watching a cardinal land on my bird feeder, its bright red plumage stark against the winter landscape. So much had changed in such a short time. Secrets exposed, alliances shifting, truths finally spoken aloud. My doorbell rang again, the sound jarring me from my thoughts. This time I checked through the peephole before opening the door. Daniel stood on the porch, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. Alone. I opened the door and stepped back to let him in. Your Uncle Alejandro just called me, I said by way of greeting. Daniel nodded, unwinding his scarf as he entered. I figured he might. I sent some information to him and Marco last night. So I heard. He looked around the living room, noticing the cleared shelves, the packed boxes. You're really going then? Yes, I confirmed. First thing tomorrow. He nodded again, his eyes tired. Vanessa's furious. She came home this morning ranting about how you'd turned everyone against her. Then her mom called, and they've been scheming ever since. Alejandro mentioned they might be planning something. Daniel's laugh held no humor. Yeah, they're still insisting on having Christmas here. Vanessa even went out and bought a bunch of cheap decorations to replace the ones you've packed away. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration he'd had since childhood. Mom, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For not seeing what was happening, for not standing up for you. The apology was what I'd been waiting for. Yet now that it had come, I found myself unable to simply say, it's okay, because it wasn't. Years of hurt couldn't be erased with one conversation. Thank you for saying that, I said instead. It means a lot, but we have a long way to go, Daniel. He nodded, accepting this. I know. I needed you to know that I see it now. The manipulation, the lies, all of it. He paused, swallowing hard. I've moved out. Temporarily, at least. I'm staying with Jake from work until I figure things out. This surprised me. That's a big step. It was necessary, he replied. After I found the financial documents, after I heard her on the phone with her mother talking about your house like it was already theirs, I couldn't stay. I gestured toward the couch, and we both sat, a careful distance between us. What happens now? He shrugged, suddenly looking very young and lost. I don't know. Lawyers, probably. Divorce, maybe. It depends on whether there's anything left to salvage once the truth is all out. I wanted to reach for his hand, to comfort him as I had when he was a child with skinned knees or hurt feelings. But we weren't there yet. This new, fragile honesty between us needed time to strengthen. And Christmas? I asked. His expression hardened slightly. Vanessa and her mother are still determined to host here. They've got some idea that they can pull it off and save face. Without food, proper decorations, or serving dishes, I raised an eyebrow. Apparently, Catherine's bringing some things from their house and they're ordering catering. He shook his head. It's insane, but they're desperate to maintain the illusion that everything's fine. I considered this, picturing Vanessa and Catherine frantically, trying to cobble together a holiday gathering in my stripped-down house. The image might have been satisfying if it weren't so sad. And what will you do? I asked. He met my eyes directly. I was hoping I could join you. At the cabin. The request took me by surprise. Part of me had been looking forward to the solitude, to a Christmas of quiet reflection away from the drama. But looking at my son, really seeing him, perhaps for the first time in years, I recognized this for what it was, a chance to rebuild. I'd like that, I said softly. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. I promise I won't intrude on your space. I can't be here. I can't watch this charade play out. We talked a while longer, making plans for the drive up to Lake Tahoe the next day. As he was eyeing, preparing to leave, he paused by the door. Mom, there's something else you should know. Uncle Alejandro, Marco, and Aunt Lucia, they're not just skipping Christmas here. They've invited the whole family to Alejandro's house instead. Most of them have already accepted. I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. So Vanessa and Catherine are planning a grand Christmas feast. For an audience that won't show up, Daniel finished. Exactly. As I closed the door behind him, I felt no vindictive joy at the thought of Vanessa's impending humiliation. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. How exhausting it must be to live as she did, constantly constructing and maintaining a false image, always fearing exposure. I turned back to my living room, to the home I'd built with love and hard work. Tomorrow, I would leave it behind for a while, stepping away from the battlefield to find peace in the mountains. But I would return stronger, clearer about my boundaries, and ready to rebuild the relationship with my son on more honest ground. For now, though, I had one last task to complete. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, navigating to my email. It was time to set the final piece in motion. The drive to Lake Tahoe was silent at first, both Daniel and I lost in our thoughts as the suburban landscape gave way to the majestic Sierra Nevada mountains. Snow dusted the pines like powdered sugar, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the winding road. Daniel insisted on driving, and I was content to watch the scenery pass by my window, occasionally checking my phone for updates. Any news? Daniel asked, glancing over as I scrolled through my messages. Margaret says 3 catering vans arrived at the house this morning, I replied, and Catherine's car was already parked in the driveway by 9. He shook his head, eyes returning to the road. They're really going through with it. Pride is a powerful motivator, I said, putting my phone away. Speaking of which, I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Daniel, for seeing the truth, even when it was painful. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Don't be too proud yet. I enabled this situation for years. We both did, I acknowledged. But we're changing that now. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew crisper, and patches of snow appeared alongside the road. The cabin I'd rented was nestled in a small clearing near the lake, surrounded by towering pines. It was rustic but charming, the perfect antidote to the chaos we'd left behind. This is beautiful, Mom, Daniel said as we unloaded our luggage. How did you find this place? I smiled, breathing in the clean mountain air. I've been planning my escape for longer than you might think. Inside, the cabin was even more inviting. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, comfortable furniture arranged to take advantage of the spectacular view through the large windows. The kitchen was small but well-equipped, and a narrow staircase led to 2 bedrooms tucked under the eaves. It feels like those Christmas vacations we used to take when Dad was alive, Daniel said softly, running his hand along the rough-hewn mantelpiece. The mention of Jack brought a bittersweet pang. It had been 15 years since cancer took him, leaving me a widow at 37 with a teenage son to raise alone. If Jack had lived, would things have been different with Vanessa? Would he have seen through her facade more quickly than I had? Your father would have liked this place, I agreed, unpacking groceries into the refrigerator, though he would have complained about the fishing prospects in winter. Daniel laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in too long. He'd have found a way. Remember that time in Colorado when he broke the ice on that pond and insisted we could catch something? And all you caught was a cold, I finished, smiling at the memory. We spent the afternoon settling in, building a fire, and preparing a simple dinner. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, though we tacitly avoided discussing Vanessa or the situation back home. This fragile peace between us felt too precious to risk. After dinner, Daniel insisted on washing the dishes while I curled up on the sofa with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. Just as I was getting lost in the story, my phone chimed with a text, then another, and another. Daniel turned from the sink, eyebrows raised. Sounds like something's happening. I checked my screen and couldn't suppress a small gasp. It's from Alejandro. He sent photos. Daniel quickly dried his hands and joined me on the couch, leaning over to see the screen. The first image showed my living room, hastily decorated with cheap, gaudy Christmas ornaments that clashed horribly with my carefully curated decor. The second showed a dining table, not my good one, which I'd stored away, but a rented folding table, covered in a red plastic tablecloth and set with paper plates and plastic cutlery. "Oh my God," Daniel murmured. "It looks like a children's birthday party." The third photo was of Catherine, standing in my kitchen with an expression of barely contained panic as she directed white-jacketed catering staff. The fourth showed Vanessa, dressed in a festive red dress that had to be new, another expense they couldn't afford, frantically arranging fake poinsettias in a vase. "Alejandro says only 7 people showed up," I said, reading his accompanying message. "Vanessa's brother Michael and his wife, 2 of Catherine's friends, and 3 distant cousins who didn't get the memo about the venue change." Daniel winced. 7 people for a catering order meant to feed 25. "And apparently," I continued, scrolling through Alejandro's updates, "Catherine is telling everyone that I had a mental breakdown and fled town, abandoning my responsibilities." Instead of the anger I might have expected, Daniel just looked tired. Of course she is, they'll never admit the truth. More texts arrived as the evening progressed. Updates from Margaret, who lived across the street and was watching the proceedings with fascinated horror, and from Alejandro, who had received reports from the few attendees who had mistakenly gone to my house before realizing the main gathering was elsewhere. The caterers left all the food and went home when Vanessa couldn't pay the balance due, Margaret reported. And now Michael and his wife are leaving too. Only Catherine's friends are still there. By 9 o'clock, the final update came through. "Lights off at your house. Everyone's gone. Vanessa and Catherine left separately. Didn't even clean up." I put my phone down, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The elaborate, deception had finally collapsed under its own weight, but there was no joy in watching another person's humiliation, even someone who had caused me so much pain. "They'll blame you for this," Daniel said quietly. "You know that, right?" I nodded, staring into the crackling fire. "I know, but for the first time in years, I don't care what they think of me." That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months, lulled by the gentle whisper of wind through the pines and the knowledge that I had finally broken free of the role I'd been trapped in for too long. Christmas Eve dawned clear and brilliant, the lake a deep blue mirror reflecting the snow-capped mountains. Daniel and I spent the morning hiking along the shore, our breath forming clouds in the cold air, our conversation light and easy. "I always thought I knew what strength looked like," Daniel said as we paused to admire the view. "But I was wrong." I glanced at him questioningly. "I thought strength was Dad fighting through his cancer treatments, never complaining," he continued. "I thought it was me working 2 jobs to get through college. Physical endurance, pushing through pain, that kind of thing." He turned to face me directly. "But what you did, silently enduring disrespect for years to keep the peace, and then finding the courage to stand up for yourself when it became too much, that's real strength. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see it." His words brought tears to my eyes. "We both learned some hard lessons," I said. "The important thing is that we're here now, together." Back at the cabin, we prepared a modest Christmas Eve dinner, far simpler than the elaborate feasts I'd been obligated to cook in previous years, yet somehow more satisfying. As we sat by the fire afterward, sipping hot chocolate with a splash of peppermint schnapps, my phone rang. I checked the screen, surprised to see Catherine's number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, putting it on speaker so Daniel could hear. "Elaine?" Catherine's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "I hope you're satisfied with yourself." "Hello, Catherine," I replied calmly. "Merry Christmas to you, too. Don't you dare take that tone with me. You've humiliated my daughter. You've destroyed our family's holiday traditions." I took a deep breath, determined not to be baited. I did nothing of the sort, Catherine. I simply chose to spend my holiday differently this year. Everything else was a consequence of decisions you and Vanessa made. Decisions we made? Her voice rose incredulously. You stripped your house bare. You turned family members against us with vicious lies. Daniel leaned forward, his expression darkening, but I held up a hand to stop him from interjecting. Catherine, I said evenly, I removed my personal belongings from my own home. I told the truth when asked directly. And most importantly, I refused to continue being used and disrespected. If those actions created problems for you, perhaps you should examine why. There was a moment of stunned silence before she rallied. Well, I hope you know that Vanessa is devastated. She may never recover from this betrayal. I thought of all the betrayals I had endured. The lies, the manipulation, the credit taken for my work, the property promised away without my knowledge. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it. No one should have to face the consequences of their actions during the holidays. But perhaps this will be a growth opportunity for her. Growth opportunity? Catherine sputtered. How dare you? After everything. She's done for you. This time I couldn't hold back a short, incredulous laugh. What exactly has Vanessa done for me, Catherine? Please enlighten me. When no immediate response came, I continued, my voice quiet but firm. The reality is that I've been treated as an unpaid servant in my own home. I've had my work claimed by others, my property promised away behind my back, and my boundaries consistently ignored. That ends now. You'll regret this, Catherine said, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Vanessa and I won't forget what you've done. Nor will I forget what you've both done, I replied. The difference is that I've forgiven myself for allowing it to happen for so long. Good night, Catherine. Merry Christmas. I ended the call, placing my phone face down on the coffee table. Daniel stared at me, a mixture of admiration and concern in his eyes. That was, wow. Not very Christmas-spirited of me, I acknowledged with a small smile. No, it was perfect, he insisted. Firm, but not cruel. Much kinder than they deserved. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the fire slowly burn down to embers. Mom, Daniel said finally, I think I'm going to file for divorce when we get back. I've been thinking about it all day, and there's just no going back from this. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not out of anger or a sense of loyalty to me, but because it's what's best for your future. He nodded thoughtfully. I know, and it is. I can see that now. He paused, staring into the dying fire. It's strange, but I feel more relieved than sad. Like I've been carrying this weight for years without realizing it, and suddenly it's gone. I understood exactly what he meant. As the clock ticked past midnight, marking the official start of Christmas Day, I felt the same lightness, as if in shedding the burden of others' expectations and, disrespect, I'd reclaimed not just my dignity, but my joy. Christmas morning broke with a stillness that seemed almost sacred. I awoke early, padding downstairs in my slippers to find the living room bathed in the soft golden glow of sunrise. Outside, a fresh dusting of snow had fallen overnight, transforming the landscape into a pristine white canvas. I made coffee and carried it to the window. Seat, wrapping myself in a blanket as I watched the forest slowly come alive. A family of deer ventured cautiously from the tree line, leaving delicate tracks in the untouched snow. In the distance, the lake shimmered like hammered silver in the early morning light. This quiet moment of peace was perhaps the greatest gift I could have given myself, far more precious than any wrapped package. Daniel joined me an hour later, his hair tousled from sleep, looking younger than he had in years. Merry Christmas, Mom, he said, bending to kiss my cheek before pouring himself coffee. Merry Christmas, sweetheart, I replied, smiling. Sleep well? Better than I have in months, he admitted, settling into an armchair across from me. I think the mountain air agrees with me. Or perhaps it's the absence of certain stresses, I suggested gently. He nodded, acknowledging the truth of it. Probably both. We had agreed to keep our Christmas simple. A few small gifts, a special breakfast, and a walk by the lake. No elaborate meal to prepare, no performances to maintain, no strain of forced conversation with people who secretly look down on us. Just mother and son, reconnecting in the quiet beauty of the mountains. After a leisurely breakfast of French toast and crisp bacon, we exchanged our modest gifts. I had managed to bring along the sweater I'd bought for Daniel months ago, and he presented me with a beautiful leather-bound journal. I noticed your old one was almost full, he explained as I ran my fingers over the supple cover. I thought, well, maybe this is a good time to start a new chapter. Literally. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched me deeply. It's perfect, I said, holding it close. Thank you. We spent the late morning walking along the lake shore, our boots crunching in the fresh snow, talking about everything and nothing. His work at the architectural firm, my part-time job at the library, books we'd read, places we hoped to visit someday. Carefully, we began to bridge the gap that had grown between us over the years, rebuilding our relationship one honest conversation at a time. As we rounded a bend in the path, Daniel suddenly stopped, his expression turning serious. I need to ask you something, Mom, and I want you to be completely honest with me. I nodded, bracing myself. Of course. Were you ever happy with the way things were? Over? These past 5 years, I mean. The question caught me off guard. I considered it carefully, wanting to give him the truth he deserved. There were moments of happiness, I said finally. Your promotion last year, when we celebrated at that Italian restaurant. The weekend we spent fixing up the garden together last spring. The quiet evenings when you'd come over alone and we'd just talk. Paused, gathering my thoughts. But underneath it all was this constant tension. This feeling that I was walking on eggshells in my own life, that I had to earn the right to be treated with basic respect. Daniel winced but nodded for me to continue. The hardest part wasn't Vanessa's behavior, I admitted. It was watching you become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who would sit silently, while his mother was belittled in her own home. He looked away, shame evident in the set of his shoulders. I don't know how I let it happen, he said quietly. It was so gradual, I guess. At first, I thought it was just normal tension between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Then it became easier to ignore the small disrespects than to confront them. And eventually you stopped seeing them at all, I finished for him. Yes. He kicked at the snow with his boot, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. I betrayed you, Mom, not just by marrying the wrong person, but by forgetting who I was, who you raised me to be. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. We can't change the past, Daniel. All we can do is learn from it and move forward. He looked at me. Then, his eyes, so like his father's, bright with unshed tears. How do you do that? How do you not hate me for what I allowed to happen? The question broke my heart. Oh, sweetheart, I said softly. I could never hate you. You're my son. I was disappointed, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But hate? Never. We stood there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the distant call of a bird and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. I want to be better, he said finally. I want to be the son you deserve. You already are, I assured him. The fact that you're here, that you're seeing clearly now, that's all I ever wanted. As we walked back to the cabin, our conversation turned to the future. What would happen when we returned home? How we would handle the inevitable confrontations. With Vanessa and her family, what boundaries needed to be established? I've been thinking, Daniel said as we crested the hill that overlooked our temporary haven, about moving back in with you for a while, just until I get my financial situation sorted out and find a place of my own. But only if you're comfortable with it. The request warmed me, not just for the opportunity to rebuild our relationship, but for the respect it showed, asking rather than assuming, acknowledging that my home was mine to share or not as I chose. I'd like that, I said sincerely. It would be nice to have you home again. His smile was worth every moment of pain I'd endured. Back at the cabin, we prepared a simple Christmas dinner together. Roast chicken with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, and steamed green beans. Nothing elaborate, nothing designed to impress. Just good food meant to nourish both body and soul. As we worked side by side in the small kitchen, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. This reminds me of when Dad was sick, Daniel said as he chopped herbs. Remember how we used to cook together while he napped? You'd let me experiment with spices even though half my combinations were terrible. I laughed at the memory. Your curry cinnamon chicken was particularly memorable. Hey, I was 13. And Dad ate it anyway, said it wasn't half bad. Your father was a brave man, I teased, bumping his shoulder with mine. As the afternoon faded into evening, we settled in front of the fire with our plates, the Christmas tree lights twinkling softly in the corner. The meal wasn't perfect. The chicken was slightly overdone, and I'd forgotten to bring salt for the potatoes. But it was made and shared with love, which made it better than any gourmet feast. My phone remained blessedly silent. No urgent texts, no angry calls, no demands for explanations or apologies. Just peaceful quiet broken only by the crackling of the fire and our own comfortable conversation. You know, Daniel said thoughtfully as we finished our meal, this is the first Christmas I can remember where I've actually felt present. Not worried about keeping up appearances or walking on eggshells or managing Vanessa's moods. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It's exhausting, isn't it? Living for someone else's approval? God, yes. He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the rough-hewn ceiling beams. I don't want to live like that anymore. Even if Vanessa and I somehow worked through this, which I don't think is possible, I couldn't go back to that constant state of tension. You shouldn't have to, I said firmly. No one should. He looked at me then, his expression serious. You didn't deserve it either, Mom. All those years of putting up with her behavior. For my sake. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I played my part, I admitted. I chose silence when I should have spoken up. I confused peacekeeping with peacemaking. That's on me. Well, he said, raising his glass of wine in a toast. Here's to speaking our truths from now on. I clinked my glass against his, smiling. To truth and to new beginnings. As the evening deepened into night, we sat by the fire, sharing stories and memories, rebuilding the connection that had been strained for too long. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows, adding to the sense of being cocooned in our own private world, far from the chaos we'd left behind. Eventually, Daniel yawned and stretched. I think I'll head up to bed. It's been quite a day. I nodded, smiling, at him fondly. Sleep well, sweetheart. After he'd gone upstairs, I sat alone by the dying fire, reflecting on the day. This Christmas had been nothing like I'd imagined it would be just a week ago, when I was dreading another holiday of servitude and silent resentment. Instead, it had become something precious, a turning point, a restoration, a quiet triumph of dignity over disrespect. I pulled out the leather journal Daniel had given me and opened it to the first blank page. For a moment, I hesitated, pen poised above the pristine paper. Then, with a sense of beginning something important, I began to write. Today, I reclaimed Christmas, not with grand gestures or elaborate decorations, but with simple truth and quiet dignity. For the first time in years, I celebrated not as someone's servant or invisible support, but as myself, Elaine Johnson, woman of worth, deserving of respect. The words flowed easily, filling the page with reflections and hopes, fears and resolutions. And as I wrote, I felt myself being restored, piece by piece, to the woman I had almost forgotten how to be. 3 days after Christmas, Daniel and I packed our belongings into the car and prepared to leave, our mountain sanctuary. The brief retreat had worked a kind of magic on both of us. The clean air, the distance from drama, the honest conversations by firelight had all combined to strengthen our resolve and clarify our path forward. I'm almost sorry to go back, Daniel admitted as he loaded the last suitcase into the trunk. It's been peaceful here. We can come back, I promised, taking one last look at the cabin that had sheltered our healing. But running away forever isn't the answer. We need to face what's waiting for us. The drive home was longer than our journey up, slowed by a light snowfall that made the mountain roads treacherous. We used the time to plan our next steps carefully. Daniel would stay with me while initiating divorce proceedings. We would change the locks on my house. We would set clear boundaries with Vanessa and her family. Simple, practical steps to reclaim our lives and dignity. Do you think she'll fight the divorce? I asked as we descended from the mountains back into the valley. Daniel sighed, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Probably. Not because she wants to stay married, but because admitting failure isn't in her playbook. He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel. The finances will be the biggest hurdle. She spent so much in my name. We'll get through it, I assured him. One step at a time. By the time we pulled into my driveway, dusk was settling over the neighborhood. The house looked undisturbed from the outside, though the Christmas lights I'd left on timer blinked cheerfully from the eaves. Home sweet home, Daniel murmured as he cut the engine. We unloaded the car quickly, eager to get out of the cold. I inserted my key into the front door lock, but it turned with unusual ease as if already unlocked. A flutter of unease passed through me. Did you leave it unlocked when we left? Daniel asked, frowning. I shook my head, pushing the door open cautiously. No, I'm certain I locked it. The moment we stepped inside, we knew something was wrong. The house had the unmistakable feeling of having been occupied in our absence. A faint smell of unfamiliar perfume hung in the air, and small things were out of place. A cushion on the wrong chair, the thermostat set higher than I'd left it. "Someone's been here," Daniel said quietly, moving protectively in front of me. "Vanessa." Or Catherine, I added, moving further into the living room. They both had keys. We moved through the house room by room, cataloging the intrusion. Nothing appeared to be stolen. In fact, nothing of real value had been disturbed at all. Instead, we found a more insidious kind of violation. Evidence that someone had been living in my house during our absence. Used coffee mugs in the sink, towels damp, in the bathroom. And most disturbing of all, signs that someone had slept in my bed. The sheets rumpled, a long blonde hair on the pillow. "She was living here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "While we were gone, Vanessa was sleeping in my house, in my bed." Daniel's expression darkened with anger. "We're changing the locks tonight. I don't care if it's New Year's Eve, I'll find a locksmith who's open." I nodded, still processing the violation. It wasn't the practical inconvenience that bothered me. A few used dishes, some rumpled sheets. It was the audacity, the sense that even after everything, Vanessa still felt entitled to my space, my possessions, my life. "Check your room too," I suggested. "See if anything's missing." Daniel disappeared down the hall to the guest room. That had once been his bedroom. A moment later, I heard him swear under his breath. "What is it?" I called, following his voice. He stood in the doorway of the guest room, staring at the open closet. "My things," he said, gesturing inside. "Some of my clothes, my extra toiletries, they're here. She must have gone to our apartment and brought them over." She was planning to move in, I realized. To stake her claim even before the divorce. We looked at each other, the full implications sinking in. This wasn't just petty revenge or a temporary solution to her housing needs during the holidays. This was a calculated attempt to establish residence in my home, perhaps even to build a case for some kind of claim to it. Daniel pulled out his phone. "I'm calling a locksmith right now, and then my lawyer." While he made the calls, I moved through the house more carefully, assessing what else might have been disturbed. In my home office, I found several drawers partially open, papers slightly disarranged. My heart sank as I realized she'd been searching for documents, perhaps my will, property deeds, financial information. I was sitting at my desk reviewing what might have been compromised when the doorbell rang. Daniel answered it, and I heard the murmur of male voices in the entryway. The locksmith, I assumed, arriving with remarkable promptness. 20 minutes later, Daniel appeared in the office doorway. "Locks are changed," he announced. "Front, back, and the sliding door to the patio. New keys for both of us. No spares hidden outside." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you." I think she went through my papers while we were gone. He crossed the room to examine the drawers I'd indicated, looking for ammunition to use against us, no doubt. "Did you find anything missing?" "I don't think so," I replied. "My important documents are in the safe deposit box at the bank," but she wouldn't have known that. We spent the next hour securing the house, checking windows, verifying that my small safe hadn't been tampered with, and gathering any items that might have been touched by Vanessa to be cleaned or laundered. Just as we were finishing, Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression tightened. "It's her," he said, showing me Vanessa's name on the caller ID. "Answer it," I advised. "Better to know what she's planning." He nodded grimly and put the phone on speaker. "Hello, Vanessa." "Daniel?" Her voice was high, almost frantic. "Where are you? I went by the apartment and your things are gone, and now I can't get into Elaine's house. My key doesn't work." The casual way she mentioned trying to enter my home as if it were her right made my blood boil, but I remained silent, letting Daniel handle the conversation. "That's because the locks have been changed," he said evenly. "And yes, I moved my essential items out of the apartment. I'm staying with my mother for now." "You changed the locks?" Vanessa's voice rose incredulously. "You can't do that. I was staying there." "Actually, Vanessa, you were trespassing," Daniel corrected her. "That house belongs to my mother, not to me, and certainly not to you. You had no right to be there in our absence." "Trespassing?" she sputtered. "I'm your wife, and Elaine's daughter-in-law. That practically makes it family property." I couldn't contain myself any longer. "No, Vanessa," I said clearly. "It doesn't. My home is mine alone, purchased with my money and maintained by me. You have never contributed a penny to this household, nor have you been invited to live here." There was a Stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Is that you, Elaine? Are you listening in on my private conversation with my husband?" "You're on speaker," Daniel explained. "And we're both letting you know that your access to this house is officially revoked. Any belongings you may have left here will be packed and delivered to you tomorrow." "This is ridiculous," Vanessa's voice cracked. With emotion, anger or panic, it was hard to tell. "You can't just lock me out and act like I don't exist. What about our marriage? What about our future?" Daniel's eyes met mine, and I saw a flash of the pain this was causing him, despite his resolve. "Vanessa," he said more gently, "you know as well as I do that our marriage has been over for a while. The lies, the debt, the way you've treated my mother, these aren't small issues we can just work through." "So that's it?" she demanded. "You're choosing her over me? After everything I've done for you?" The familiar refrain, "everything I've done for you," hung in the air, as empty now as it had always been. What exactly had Vanessa done for either of us, except take and demand and manipulate? "I'm choosing honesty," Daniel replied steadily. "I'm choosing respect and integrity, values that seem to be in short supply in our relationship." "You'll regret this," Vanessa said, her voice suddenly cold. "Both of you. You think you've won, but this isn't over." With that ominous pronouncement, she hung up. Daniel let out a long breath, placing his phone face down on the desk. Well, that was pleasant. Despite the tension of the moment, I found myself smiling. Actually, it was, in a strange way. He looked at me questioningly. "You stood your ground," I explained. "You were clear and firm without being cruel. I'm proud of you." A small, sad smile touched his lips. "Thanks, Mom." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. "I need to call Jake and let him know I won't be coming back to his place, and probably warn him that Vanessa might show up there looking for me." As he stepped into the hallway to make his call, I sat back in my chair, processing all that had happened. The invasion of my home should have left me feeling violated and afraid. Instead, I felt strangely empowered. We had responded with swift, decisive action. We had stood together, a united front against manipulation. And most importantly, we had spoken our truth without apology. The house felt different now, cleansed somehow, despite the lingering evidence of Vanessa's presence. Tomorrow we would change the bedding, wash the towels, scrub away any trace of the intrusion. But tonight, secure behind new locks, I felt a peace settling over me that had nothing to do with the physical space and everything to do with the knowledge that I was finally truly home in my own life. Later that evening, as Daniel and I sat in the living room sharing a simple dinner, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Alejandro. "Just checking that you arrived home safely. Catherine is in quite a state. Apparently Vanessa has been evicted from your house. If you need any assistance dealing with them, please don't hesitate to ask." The offer of support from an unexpected quarter warmed me. I showed the message to Daniel. "Looks like you've got allies in the enemy camp," he observed. "That could be useful." I nodded thoughtfully. Alejandro seems like a decent man. It's nice to know not everyone in Vanessa's family shares her flexible relationship with ethics. As I typed a polite response thanking Alejandro for his concern, another text arrived. This one from Margaret across the street. "Welcome home. Saw the locksmith earlier. Smart move. Just FYI, blonde ambition has been coming and going at all hours while you were away. Even had some kind of party 2 nights ago. Lots of noise, lots of cars. Let me know if you need anything." I showed this message to Daniel as well, and he shook his head in disbelief. "A party? In your house? Without your permission?" He let out a low whistle. "Her audacity is truly impressive. It's all part of the same pattern," I sighed. "My home, my possessions, my life, all just resources for her to use as she sees fit." "Well, that stops now," Daniel said firmly. "Tomorrow we start the official process of untangling our lives from hers." We finished our meal and cleared away the dishes. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief at being home, anger at the violation of my space, but most of all, a deep-seated conviction that we were on the right path. The road ahead would be challenging, no doubt. Vanessa's threat, "This isn't over," suggested she wouldn't let go easily. But for the first time in years, I felt equal to whatever came next. That night, I stripped my bed completely, replacing the linens Vanessa had used with fresh sheets that smelled of lavender. As I slid between them, I thought about how far I'd come in just over a week, from a woman who silently accepted disrespect to one who stood firmly in her own power. Not bad for an old lady, I murmured to myself with a smile, using Catherine's dismissive label as a badge of honor. At 52, I was far from old, but I was undeniably wiser than I'd been before. And that wisdom would light my way forward, one day at a time. The first weeks of January unfolded in a flurry of legal consultations, financial discoveries, and emotional reckonings. Daniel officially filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences rather than detailing Vanessa's financial deceptions. A kindness she probably didn't deserve, but one that spoke to his inherent decency. The process unleashed exactly the storm we'd anticipated. Vanessa alternated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and vicious accusations, sometimes within the same conversation. Catherine made good on her threat to spread the narrative that I had suffered some kind of breakdown, telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned my family during the holidays out of spite and selfishness. But something unexpected happened. The rumors didn't stick. People who had known me for years, neighbors, colleagues at the library, friends from my book club, recognized the discrepancy between Catherine's portrait of a mentally unstable woman and the calm, composed person they interacted with daily. Mrs. Phillips from the garden club asked me today if it was true you'd joined a cult, Margaret reported with a laugh during one of our coffee dates. Apparently that's Catherine's latest theory about why you've turned against Vanessa. I couldn't help but smile. What did you tell her? That if by cult she meant the radical belief that women deserve respect in their own homes, then yes, you're a devoted member. Each day brought new challenges, but also new moments of clarity and strength. Daniel discovered the full extent of the debt Vanessa had accumulated in his name. Nearly $60,000, not the 40 he'd initially found. I learned that she had indeed been telling people for years that I had promised her my house after my death, creating elaborate stories about how we had discussed it during special mother-daughter dinners that had never occurred. The thing is, Daniel said one evening as we reviewed financial documents at the kitchen table, I actually believed some of those stories. She'd come home and tell me about these deep conversations you two supposedly had when I wasn't around. When would we have had them? I asked, genuinely curious. She barely spoke to me unless she needed something. He shook his head, the scales fully fallen from his eyes. I don't know. I guess I wanted to believe you two had a relationship, that the two women I loved most actually cared for each other. The admission touched me deeply. For all the pain of the past weeks, moments like these, of honest reflection and genuine connection with my son, made it worthwhile. 3 weeks after our return, on a crisp Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Daniel was out meeting with his lawyer, so I answered it myself, half expecting to find Vanessa staging another confrontation, despite the restraining order we'd been forced to obtain after she'd shown up drunk at midnight, demanding entry. Instead, I found an elegant older woman on my doorstep, her silver hair styled in a classic bob, her camel coat and leather gloves speaking of tasteful affluence. "Elaine Johnson?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "Yes," I replied cautiously. She extended a gloved hand. "Lucia Mendez, Alejandro's sister, Vanessa's aunt." I hesitated only briefly before shaking her hand. "Please, come in." In my living room, Lucia declined coffee, but accepted a seat on the sofa. Her posture was perfect, her expression difficult to read. "I apologize for coming unannounced," she began, "but I felt it was important to speak with you directly, away from the drama that seems to follow my niece and sister-in-law." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "What happened at Christmas was inexcusable," she said directly. "The way Catherine and Vanessa have treated you, not just then, but for years from what I gather, is shameful." Her frankness surprised me. "Thank you for saying that. I'm not here just to apologize for my family's behavior," Lucia continued, removing her gloves with deliberate movements. "I'm here because I believe you deserve to know the full truth." Something in her tone made me sit up straighter. "The full truth about what?" Lucia's dark eyes, so like Alejandro's, met mine directly. "About Vanessa. About her pattern of behavior that extends far beyond her treatment of you." For the next hour, Lucia painted a portrait of Vanessa that was as disturbing as it was illuminating. This wasn't the first time Vanessa had manipulated her way into a comfortable situation, taken financial advantage, or claimed others' work as her own. Before Daniel, there had been another serious relationship that ended when the man discovered credit cards opened in his name. Before that, a college roommate whose design portfolio Vanessa had presented as her own work to secure an internship. "The family has enabled her for years," Lucia admitted, a shadow of regret crossing her elegant features. Catherine most of all. Making excuses, covering up incidents, pressuring others to forgive and forget. When Vanessa married your son and seemed to settle down, we hoped perhaps she had finally matured. Instead, she just found a new target, I said quietly. Lucia nodded. You and Daniel both. And when you finally stood up to her at Christmas, it forced many of us to confront the truth we've been avoiding. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a slim folder. I brought these for you. Copies of emails, financial records, evidence of Vanessa's creative relationship with the truth over the years. I thought they might be useful for Daniel's divorce proceedings. I accepted the folder, moved by this unexpected alliance. Why are you doing this? She's your family. Lucia's eyes held a mix of sadness and determination. Yes, she is, and I love her despite everything. But enabling her behavior isn't love, it's cowardice. I've been complicit too long by staying silent. She rose to leave, smoothing her coat. There must be consequences, or she will never change. After Lucia left, I sat for a long time with the folder unopened on my lap. The information inside could potentially make Daniel's divorce easier, protect his finances, perhaps even help restore his credit. But it would also cause pain, not just to Vanessa, but to Daniel as well, forcing him to confront just how thoroughly he had been deceived. When Daniel returned home that afternoon, I showed him the folder and explained Lucia's visit. You should read it, I said gently, but only when you're ready. He stared at the folder, as if it might bite him. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll lock it away, I promised. This isn't about vengeance, Daniel, it's about protection. Yours and mine. He nodded slowly, then reached for the folder with a deep breath. No, I need to see it. All of it. No more hiding from the truth. I left him alone in the living room with Lucia's documents, giving him the privacy to process whatever he discovered there. When I returned an hour later with tea, his face was pale but composed. She's been doing this for years, he said without preamble. The same patterns, the same manipulation, the same lies. There are emails here from her ex-boyfriend's sister, from former friends, even from a professor who caught her plagiarizing. He looked up at me, eyes haunted. How did I not see it? How was I so blind? I sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. Because she showed you what you wanted to see. That's what skilled manipulators do. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I feel like such a fool. Join the club, I said with a small smile. I was fooled too, remember? For 5 years, I let her treat me like a servant in my own home because I was afraid of losing you. This drew a half smile from him. Some pair we make, huh? But we're learning, I reminded him. We're seeing clearly now. The folder from Lucia proved invaluable in the weeks that followed. Daniel's lawyer used the evidence of Vanessa's pattern of financial deception to expedite the divorce proceedings and protect Daniel from liability for most of the debt she had incurred in his name. It wasn't a perfect solution. His credit would still take years to recover fully, but it was a start. Vanessa, faced with irrefutable evidence of her deceptions presented by not just Daniel but members of her own family, finally stopped fighting the inevitable. By early March, the divorce was finalized with surprising speed, leaving Daniel legally free but emotionally bruised. Throughout this period, I found myself changed in ways both subtle and profound. The woman who had once swallowed insults to keep the peace now spoke her mind clearly and calmly. The mother who had feared losing her son's love now trusted in the strength of their rebuilt relationship. The homeowner who had allowed her space to be invaded now maintained firm boundaries about who could enter and under what conditions. These changes didn't go unnoticed. Friends commented on my newfound confidence. Colleagues at the library remarked on my more assertive contributions to meetings. Even my doctor noted the improvement in my blood pressure at my annual checkup. Less stress? She asked with a knowing smile. More self-respect, I replied. It turns out they're related. As spring arrived, bringing new growth to the garden I'd neglected during the winter's turmoil, Daniel announced his intention to find his own apartment. Are you sure? I asked over breakfast, trying not to sound disappointed. The months of having him back home had been healing for both of us. I am, he said, his expression thoughtful rather than troubled. I need to stand on my own again, rebuild my life, but I'll be close. Bye, he added quickly, seeing my face. Maybe even in this neighborhood. I smiled, recognizing this as a healthy step forward. I think that's wise. And you know you're always welcome here, for dinner, for advice, or just to visit. I know, Mom. He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. This time, I won't forget what matters. The day Daniel moved into his new apartment, a sunny, our one bedroom just 10 minutes away, marked another milestone in our journey. As I helped him arrange furniture and stock his kitchen, I felt none of the loss or abandonment I had feared. Instead, there was pride in his resilience and confidence in our stronger, more honest relationship. That evening, I returned to my quiet house, which no longer felt empty but peaceful. In the past months, I had, reclaimed not just my physical space, but my sense of self. I'd learned that speaking up wasn't selfish, that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, that respecting myself wasn't optional. I made myself a cup of tea and settled into my favorite chair by the window, opening the leather journal Daniel had given me for Christmas. The pages were filling quickly with reflections, insights, and plans for the future. Tonight, I had something specific to capture, a realization that had been forming slowly over months of healing and growth. I wrote, "Today, I helped Daniel move into his new apartment, and as I drove home, I realized something profound. The greatest gift I've given myself wasn't standing up to Vanessa, or reclaiming my home, or even rebuilding my relationship with my son. It was learning to value my own worth without external validation. For years, I measured my value through others' eyes, as Jack's wife, as Daniel's mother, as the helpful neighbor, the accommodating mother-in-law. I confused self-sacrifice with love, silence with peace. But real love, for others and for oneself, requires truth. It demands respect. It thrives on authenticity. I lost sight of that after Jack died. Perhaps I was too focused on being everything Daniel needed that I forgot to be what I needed. Perhaps I was simply afraid of being alone. Whatever the reason, I allowed myself to become invisible in my own life, a supporting character rather than the protagonist of my own story. No more. The woman who endured disrespect to keep the peace has been replaced by one who knows her worth isn't negotiable. The mother who feared losing her son's love has been replaced by one who trusts in the strength of honest connection. The homeowner who allowed her space to be invaded has been replaced by one who maintains firm boundaries without apology. I am Elaine Johnson, not just someone's mother or almost mother-in-law or neighbor or colleague, but a woman of substance and value in my own right. And that knowledge, hard-won through pain and courage and truth, is the foundation upon which I'll build whatever comes next. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of completion. The past months had been difficult, painful even, but necessary. Like a forest after fire, new growth was emerging from the scorched earth of old patterns and expectations. Outside my window, the cherry tree I'd planted, after Jack's death, was bursting into bloom, its delicate pink petals catching the last golden rays of sunset. Spring had arrived in my garden and in my life, a season of renewal, of growth, of possibilities. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them as this new version of myself, a woman who had learned, finally, that respect begins with self-respect, and that true peace comes not from avoiding conflict, but from standing firmly in one's truth. And that perhaps was the most valuable Christmas gift I could have ever received. Not wrapped in shiny paper under a tree, but discovered in the quiet strength of saying no, when I'd spent too many years saying yes at my own expense. The journey wasn't over. Life never is. But I was ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed not just my Christmas, but myself.